Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Real Talk with HR Experts, Human Capital Strategies for Your Business. It's just 1 o'clock, so we'll give it a few more seconds to let people join. We can see people joining now. We'd love to hear where you're from in the chat. Tell us where you are. Is it snowy? Is it sunny? Oh, I got to be able to see the chat if I'm going to ask you to type into it. I lost my chat. All right. Well, I'm calling from Massachusetts, where it's pretty cold outside and sunny. We've had some snow earlier this week, and I think we might be getting some more snow later this week. The kids are always on alert, obviously, for school to be canceled. So they're typically our most reliable meteorologists. So we'll see how that goes, and good luck to everybody wherever you are joining us from. Before we get started, yeah, like I said, please use the chat. We're planning on using that for our Q&A. So make sure that you have that open on your screen and share your feedback with us there. And we'd like to welcome you today once again. Thank you for joining us. MP Wired for HR. Let's go through our agenda. All right, first, like I said, MP welcomes you to joining us today. We're a software and services provider for all of your human capital needs, whether it's payroll, time and attendance, performance management, and training. And we also have a team of SHRM certified HR professionals that work with our clients. Today, joining us, I'm really excited to have 3 members of our team. Whoops, did I skip over the agenda? All right. Guess we're having a few technical difficulties here on my side. I apologize for that. Like I said, we're going to go around and introduce our speakers, and then the topics that we've heard from you that you wanted to hear from us about is what we're going to talk about today. So lots going on in the ever-changing world of compliance. Also, why training is so important in organizations, as well as workforce planning. And then we'll open it up to you for Q&A, and we'll close by the top of the hour. So thank you. All right, we talked a little bit about MP. It's also my responsibility to share our legal disclaimer. This is for training and educational purposes only, but you should always be sure to consult with your attorneys if you're having labor issues or tax issues in your workforce as well. So I'm very pleased to have 3 members of our HR services team here with us today, and would love to take the opportunity for each of them to introduce themselves. So let's get started. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm happy to be here with my teammates. My name is Jen Saray. I'm a senior HR partner here at MP. I've been in kind of the realm of HR, I'd say, for about 15 years or so, and I've been with MP for 6.5 years. And when I'm not at MP, I'm a mom to 2 toddlers and Bowser the Schnauzer, so I have my hands full.
All right, Meg.
Hi, thanks so much, Rachel. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. My name is Meg Olivastri. I'm a senior HR partner here at MP as well. I've been in HR for also about 15 years. The first, I guess, 13 were in-house HR roles, so I relate very closely to a lot of my clients. And the last 2 years, I've been in the consulting world here at MP.
All right, and Sharon.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Sharon Hui. I am a senior HR partner here at MP. I've been with the company for almost 2 years. Been in HR and I'm dating myself here, for about 25 years. And after 25 years, I've worked in a HR consultative role, such as where I am today at MP, for about 18 years.
All right, well, we've got a wealth of experience on the call today and really excited to hear from everyone. But first, we'd like to hear from you in the audience. We've got a quick poll we want to launch to hear what are the most pressing issues for your team today. You can respond right in the live poll. Do we end the poll to see the responses? I don't see any live responses. All right, look at that. Well, we know that recruiting and retention is a challenge for everyone, so we are going to touch on that a little bit today. But we're definitely going to touch on compliance and reporting, our number two issue, as well as all of these topics. So thanks for helping us understand where you're coming from and the challenges that you face. And we'll start our conversation from there. So thanks. Compliance. We've said it a couple of times already. This is one of the challenges that we hear continuously from our clients, managing different compliance issues, whether they're state or national, the employee relations that goes along with it. Sharon, you've worked with many of our clients on lots of compliance issues. Will you share some of those experiences with us?
Absolutely, happy to share. So, one of the hottest topics that have been coming up in our recent years is, of course, the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, and also things that have transpired because of ACA. So, just to talk more a little bit about ACA, I've had some client experiences where, we have clients that don't fall under the realm of the applicable large client employee count where they have to offer health insurance for many years. But as business grows, as employees demographics change, there has been some growing concern about employers not really keeping um, a careful watch of where their employee growth is in terms of how to calculate whether or not their company is subject to be part of that applicable large employer consideration. So that's when a lot of employers approach us and say, "Yeah, we're growing, but I don't think we really meet that qualification because we have a lot of seasonal employees or part-time employees that don't really fit the definition." But that's where the pitfall really lies, is that sometimes employers that may have, let's say, 80 part-time employees could possibly fall under the applicable large employer count. And those are things that we would have to kind of reel the employers back in to make them aware that they need to really start paying attention to the number of hours that their employees are working and looking through some of the measurement periods that the ACA requirements do put on employers to manage and to basically analyze on a regular basis. So, just to give you all a very quick overview, there are several different measurement periods that employers need to look into, such as measurement periods and look back periods. And then that they also have to have qualifying coverage in terms of whether or not the ALEs must offer full-time equivalents, affordable care, and whether or not that meets the minimum value standard. And then there are certain notices that employers do also need to provide as well, such as notice of health insurance in the marketplace, summary of benefits, notice of material modifications, and disclosure of grandfathered status. And then there's also the annual reporting, and this is where we as HR professionals get busy every year when we are approaching that time where employers need to really start pulling all their reports together. So some of our clients who are part of our payroll will have the opportunity to gather reports through our payroll system. So we'll be able to assist them with making sure that the reports are reporting the information that needs to be populated in order to generate that and get all the reports out and all the applicable forms out to employees at certain times of the year, such as the 1094s and 1095s. And there are many things that employers just it's in over their heads. It's a lot to deal with. It's very cumbersome, and for someone who has never offered health insurance before, it's a foreign language to a lot of employers. And even for us as HR professionals, we're always keeping up with all the ever-changing requirements. So, just recently in Massachusetts, um, we now have to report some of this information just recently in early February for those employers in Massachusetts that had over 100 employees. Work in the last year because of the recent act that went into place. That's also in relation to the Pay Transparency Act coming that's going to be effective later on in the year. So there are a lot of moving parts that we have to keep up, and unfortunately, some of these things, these reporting requirements, are not really released to us, the general public, until sometimes days before, where some portals are not open, and that's when employers scramble and try to get all the reports in. And we do our best to monitor those and inform our clients to make sure that they are staying on top of these things. So that's one part of the ACA. Now, the other part that kind of transpired through the out of the ACA requirement is that, some employers that don't offer health insurance, they may not necessarily want to continue to do that. So they would rather offer a reimbursement of some sort so that employees can still obtain coverage elsewhere, but the employer is going to reimburse them for the cost. And this is a plan that's called the ICHRA, the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. So it's an alternative to traditional health insurance, where employers are not offering health insurance, but they're offering a alternate way for them to help employees offset the cost of their health insurance, where whether they are getting it through another job or through a spouse's coverage or even through the health connector. So there's a lot of moving parts with that. And I've had several, and Meg and Jen probably could speak to that too. We've had some employers that started offering that last year, and that kind of makes the ACA compliance reporting a little bit more complicated than your traditional employer that offers health insurance, because there's a lot of different fields that we need to look into and other considerations. And that's something that we've been trying to wrap our head around as HR professionals, to make sure that those employers that offer the ICHRA are able to produce those 1094s and 1095s appropriately, so that their employees can have that information on hand to do their filings. A couple of clients, one client of mine in particular, has always provided the reimbursement even before ACA to their employees, but they didn't do it the right way. They didn't take into consideration taxes and other legal complications. So they were informed by one of their, I think it was one of their CPAs, that they needed to start looking things on a more legal standpoint to make sure that they're not going to run into any situations with the IRS. So this is where the ICRA kind of came up, and that's when they started offering that last year. And of course, being the first year reporting that for ACA purposes, it's they basically kept me on my toes. There's a lot of things that we have to look into to make sure that the information is filled in correctly for the reports, and it just adds a layer of complication, and that's what we're here for as HR professionals. We may not know the answers to everything, but we do have the resources that we can lean into to offer insight and to point our clients in the right direction if their particular situations might be a little different from others, because not everybody has the same health insurance or the same ICHRA setup. But that's what we're here for. We're here to offer support, and we're here to share information as soon as we find them out.
That's a lot for organizations to keep up with, Sharon. I mean, you just talked about organizations of all different sizes that are offering all different kinds of benefits, their various options, and the way, obviously that they're covered, the way that they're reported, the way that they're taxed. And that's why it is really important to have an HR professional on your team, whether they're within your organization or you're working with someone outside like MP, because they have much more experience keeping up with all of these changes on a regular basis because we're focused on it. Can you talk a little bit about, Sharon, or maybe Meg or Jen, what are some of the risks for companies that find themselves out of compliance with these ACA requirements?
Well, there's certainly, so I had a few clients this year hit that 50-person large employer compliance. So I got to go through it from scratch with about 3 of my clients this year, and it was a really good experience. But to Rachel and Sharon's point, it's very complicated, and we live it every day, and it's still complicated. I mean, it's 1095 time, and we all have our kind of cheat sheet on the different codes and the forms and all the things, because there's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. And as far as the compliance piece, we are doing everything that we can with our clients to ensure that it does not rise to that level of what can become pretty hefty fines. They can get very, very expensive very quickly. And there's really kind of 2 things that the government's looking at, and it's the affordability piece for your plans, making sure that your employees, it's meeting those affordability thresholds. And that does change every year. It changed again this year. And then in addition that employees are being offered the healthcare and that coverage. So those are really the two big buckets that we're focusing on a lot with our clients. More so it's that employees are being offered actually rises to a higher level. It's the bigger fine. It's the most hefty one. But that affordability piece also plays a role as well. And there are ways that we're working with some clients whose maybe the broker wasn't set up for success with their plans last year. And so we need to maybe make some adjustments for this year, whether it's during an open enrollment or subsidies or things like that. Just helping mitigate those risks for our clients as we're kind of going through the reporting and building out the ACA in the background, realizing where those holes are and being able to fix that for our clients going forward.
Thank you so much, Meg. That's a great explanation. And Meg had a client who gave her a shout out in the chat, who's helped her work through some of
Yep,
these
we had a
things.
good
So
time
thank
together
you for
doing that.
Rachel, could I just chime in before we move to the next? Because I wanted to just add in for, for those of you who are on the call who are kind of, maybe you're with us for HR, maybe not, maybe you're choosing us for payroll, and maybe you're kind of on the cusp and you're kind of worried about how do I know when I'm kind of approaching, maybe becoming the ALE. There are some great reports in iSolve that you can run, a large employer compliance test report, and it's really great because it's going to kind of help count all those, part-time people that you might not be thinking of, right, in terms of meeting that count. So there are some great resources available to you in iSolved.
Thanks, Jen. That's a great call out. And like Jen said, no matter what capacity you may or may not be working with MP in at this point in time, we're always available as a resource. So, just reach out and we're always willing to help in any way, that we can. So, in addition to all of this healthcare and ACA reporting and compliance we've been talking about, another area that's really important is equal opportunity employment data. And so, Sharon, we know that you've had some experience working with clients on EEO reporting and compliance as well. Can you talk about that?
Right, thank you. So, yes, so absolutely. So, just like ACA, there are some employers that feel that they don't fall under the EEO reporting because they've always had less than 100 employees. And that's an area that's always been um, very hard to determine, just like the ACA, right? What's considered a full-time employee? How do I know when I need to start reporting? So, just, you know, the basic guideline is that if any employers have over 100 employees, they do need to file this information. And usually, this is information that's collected throughout the year by employers, and they should be able to input that information in their own database to track their employee demographics, right? So we're tracking things such as work data by job category, sex, race, and ethnicity that needs to be reported to EEO. So if you are on our payroll system on iSolve, then we have reports that we're able to help you generate so that you can get those reports ready and submit them to the EOC when the time comes. And usually the deadline to file those is sometime in early June of every year. Just for an FYI, this year's deadline to file is June 4th, 2025 for the EEO1 reports. So if anyone ever has any questions about whether or not they are going to be going over that 100 employee count threshold, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, or even, um, you know, even if it's just a casual conversation. We're happy to talk more about it, learn more about your demographics, and figure out whether or not you really truly have to file. Because there have been a lot of confusion with employers. I have a few that reached out to me and say, I don't know if it's really based on just one state. What if we have multiple employers and employees in different states? Is it per employee, per state that has to have over 100? So those are things that we can talk through to help you determine whether or not you may fall under that threshold. Uh, but I would say for best practice purposes, start monitoring your employees when you reach the 85 to 90 employee count, just so that you can start keeping an eye and kind of monitor where your employee counts will be approaching. Do you see yourselves increasing your workforce, within the next couple of months in the near future? If you do, then that's something that you really need to start thinking about tracking in terms of the employee demographics that need to be reported to the EEO. Um, and then there's also some, tax compliance that we always get questions on, right? So key state-specific tax regulations. Since COVID, there have been a lot of movement of employees that decided, because of the um, ability to work remotely that they feel that they can just pack up their things and move to a different state because of quality of life or whatever reason, right? Whatever personal reason they may have. And sometimes it's hard for employers to keep up with what they need to do to set up their employees correctly, in terms of taxes, and these could affect many things, not just your regular run-of-the-mill taxes and withholdings, but also whether or not certain um, state policies may apply to those employees because they live in that state now, or would they be reporting directly to where the headquarters is or where their main work location is, and also other state leaves as well. And I know that we're going to be talking a little bit more about leaves later on in our hour, but those are things that would need to be taken into consideration. And sometimes employers don't think about that, and they just realize, oh, it's just a simple employee update on their addresses, so that we know how to or where to send, important company documents such as W-2s at the end of the year. But we do, from your payroll perspective, we do need to know these things. And from an HR perspective, as your HR partner, we do need to know these things because we wouldn't otherwise would not be able to guide you if an employee happens to be qualified for certain state protected leaves down the road because now they live in a different state, or whether or not they have certain deductions that need to come out for any state benefit disability deductions. So those are things that we do need to know. But you do need to also think about, again, where the employee is going to be working, right? What is considered their home state versus their work location. So those are things that we can help talk about. I just this week had a client that had different scenarios that were thrown to me, saying, I have, an employee who lives in New Hampshire, but it's a hybrid role. So she would drive over to our office in Massachusetts and work, maybe once a week, up to 2 times a week. But because she is now set up as New Hampshire, she wants to change her tax withholdings to Massachusetts because it's more beneficial for her in terms of unemployment and other tax reasons. And I just had to kind of dissect the situation with her and say, let's talk about, the work reporting structure. Is the employee working mainly from home? Will that employee work 51% or more over in from her home location, New Hampshire? Because that really tells me that this person really should be coded as a New Hampshire employee if she's working more than 51% of the time during the week as an employee of the company. So those are things that we can talk you through. Um, and there's still, there may be some other ones that are a little bit more complicated where we may have to direct them to talk to their own CPAs, whether it's the employee's own CPA or the company's own organization CPA. So those are things that we want to make aware of with our clients. And, the best thing to do is that anytime you do notice that there's a movement of employees moving from one state to another, just pick up the phone and call us so that we can have a conversation. And then we can also work with your account managers to inform them of how they may need to adjust certain tax deductions or set them up for unemployment in the new states that they're in.
That's a
Yeah.
really great example, Sharon. Thank you so much. I mean, especially those of us in New England know how many people live and work in different states, and that can be
Mhm.
very complicated. And you want to make sure, as a business owner, obviously, that you're appropriately compliant. One of the issues that is going to continue or going to arise even more is with regard to pay transparency, and that's going to vary by state. And we decided that that topic was worthy of its own webinar. So we're going to do a whole session on it in March. But for now, Meg, can you touch on a couple of the things that you're going to be talking about with regard to pay transparency so people can start getting their thoughts together on it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a big topic, especially for those of us in Massachusetts. And it's, it went into law last year. It's going to be taking effect this year. We've certainly presented on pay transparency before. I think we've talked about it twice already, and it's such a hot topic. We are going to do it again in March. We're going to be talking about what is pay transparency? What does it mean? What does it mean for you and your business in some of the different states that you're in? We will kind of hyper focus. There will be a few slides in there on Massachusetts specifically because it is the brandy new one this year, and has recently, the first piece, this wage reporting that Sharon mentioned, took effect already. And the next piece will be in October that we'll want to be discussing. So I hope to see you in March.
Thank you. And you told us all at the top of the session with the poll that recruiting and retention is one of your top priorities. Meg's definitely going to talk about that in the context of
For
pay
sure.
transparency, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Great. All right, moving along. We'll leave compliance and reporting behind for now. Let's turn to training. We all know that training is so important in organizations for so many different reasons. And we work with just about every client that we work with training in some capacity. We have a robust library of content that's accessible to our clients, as well as our learning management system. But we can also consult with you on just what type of training courses and curriculum, do you need for your organization and your industry. So Jen, can you tell us about some of the clients that you've worked with in their training initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, just making sure I'm off mute. Okay, looks good. I'm happy to speak to that, Rachel. And I think one of the most interesting things about, our job and keeps it exciting, right? We get to work with so many different groups and contacts. We really get to meet clients where they're at, depending on, the training and development needs of their teams. And just for kind of listeners too, I think it's important for you to think about the individuals and teams that, manage others at your organization or those who have some type of HR responsibility, so you can think about how you can support them to be successful. Um, and we have a lot of primary contacts at our clients that don't have an HR background, right? They are just kind of wearing the HR hat as part of many of the other hats they have to wear for their primary responsibility, whether that's CFOs or business owners, office managers, right? And they're coming into kind of our partnership with a certain lens, and they have ideas about what they think they need to work on and what they don't know and they need education on in terms of HR. But there's often kind of this fear of like those unknown unknowns, right? Like what's going to get me in trouble that I don't even know about, right? So, when getting to know clients, I ask a lot of questions to try to get a sense of where they're at, where are you starting from, get a sense of like your current state of HR, and uncover those unknowns, and make a plan for recommended trainings to get you the education and kind of understanding for what you need to be able to operate at your level. For example, I work with a lot of clients in a variety of industries, um, that I'm finding there's a lot of just kind of false assumptions out there about when an employee can be classified as exempt from overtime versus non-exempt and eligible for overtime. I think most know that they need to receive a guaranteed salary, a salary above the federal or state threshold. There's a lot of talk about the salary thresholds going up, and then that was kind of thrown out thanks to those pros increases. We all know about that. But, I think those job duties tests are often overlooked. And there's just this false assumption that, hey, my managers are all just going to be, salaried exempt, right? And not really thinking about, you know the true requirements that looking at the Fair Labor Standards Act and proper classification. So really here to educate, right? And so doing trainings with contacts, so we can kind of take a look and see, are your current employees properly classified, and maybe you have a new position that you think you're going to be adding in, right? So it can kind of also then talk through what is the process for if you need to reclassify somebody and how to properly execute that, right? And then, on the other end, work with a lot of clients that might have like a really kind of green HR contact, maybe like an admin, who they want to really kind of train up to kind of be the primary contact working with me. Someone who's interested in HR but doesn't have, that hands-on experience. So it's important to, kind of help get them trained up on some of the basics that are, still really important, right? Like I-9s. I think that's a really big one that I've helped train up several clients that had a green HR person. I-9 compliance is so important. I think especially, with some of the, executive orders coming out, right? Like I-9s, we're going to have to make sure that I-9s are filled out really properly. You want to be prepared in the event that you are audited, right? So it's so important to kind of know what sections of the I-9 the employer, completes versus the employee, and how to make corrections if you do find there are errors, right? Also things like, progressive discipline and termination best practices that'll help that person become more confident in their role, knowing they have their HR partner as a sounding board and to kind of help with more of those strategic projects and complex employee relations issues. But it can be so helpful for that person to receive that kind of foundational training. So I really enjoy those opportunities to partner with someone and give them those kind of basic kind of HR far as skills there. And then we also partner with, HR teams that have so much on their plate. They don't always have time to offer robust training to managers and employees, or time to focus on their own development for that matter. So I think they find it really helpful to have, an outside speaker deliver the bulk of the training content to their people managers. Sometimes they could be saying the exact same thing. I think I've had this situation happen so many times where a client has told me, like, I've tried to tell them this, but they're not listening to me. I think if you come in and kind of present a training on this, they're going to listen to you. It just lands better sometimes when it comes from the outside. And I've also had a lot of success where I actually partner with an internal member of the HR team at my client, and we're really able to kind of build off each other. So I present kind of the core content, but then they're able to kind of build upon the points I'm making with examples that are pertinent to their team. And really, I think like the most successful trainings I've led have been those where there's some, dialogue, some engagement. So I do always try to ask questions of participants or include some type of activity to get them talking and sharing ideas with each other. Um, but I think where, I think Meg and Sharon would agree with me. I think where we make the biggest impact, or we see the biggest impact they're able to make with training, is with managers, right? Because
Absolutely.
those
Mhm.
frontline managers, right? They're out, and with the day to day, with employees. They're really like the eyes and ears of the business, right? So, and leaders don't always know what's going on day to day. So, your managers, we're really trusting our managers to bring things to us, right? Like to let us know when something might be going on. And unfortunately, I think sometimes without kind of training to kind of know what's expected of them, sometimes first line managers might think, hey, this isn't my problem, or, I'm going to put on the earmuffs and ignore, issues that are kind of maybe happening around me, or the rumblings that, maybe could, but it could lead to being a, harassment or discrimination claim later on. An example I like to share for those of you in Massachusetts, there is an individual liability component to harassment laws, right? So if the conduct is so egregious that a manager should have known something was going on, a business should have known something was going on, they can be held individually liable, right? So it's so important to train managers, and I will get to talking about harassment a little bit more, but I think that's just one of the big reasons why it's so important to make sure your managers, as you're on the front lines kind of staff, are really trained up. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that so many people in management, right, they didn't really get a lot of training on people skills. They're probably promoted because they're great at their job, great at the task of their job, but then never given that support to kind of do. I think probably the hardest part of being a manager is just the people management, right? And we know that managers play a huge role in employee engagement and retention. So I think the more we can, equip managers to balance that fine line of, supporting employees, but also holding them accountable, we can also help employees to be successful. And we have some really great manager trainings that I've been presenting a lot in the past year. Kind of a management best practices, management 101 training that really addresses some of the tricky topics, like navigating the transition from, being a peer to getting promoted, and now you are supervising your former peer group, right? Like how do you deal with the optics of favoritism, right? You still be, can't get lunch with your best friend that used to get lunch with every day now that they're your direct report without including everyone. And how to delegate too. That's something that people just avoid. I know how to do the task best myself. I'm just going to keep doing it, without, keeping in mind that a manager's job is really to get work done through, those direct reports instead of just taking it on yourself because it's easier, right? And one of my favorite components of that management training, too, is when we talk about understanding management styles. We have a questionnaire that we ask all managers to fill out, and it just asks a series of questions, and it really helps find out, what that manager's primary kind of management style is, or if it's a mix of two or more styles. And we talk about kind of the pros and cons of each style, and that there really isn't like one correct style that you're going to necessarily want to use all the time, but that really the best managers are those that can learn to pivot their management style based on the employee that they're working with or the department, and that it can shift depending on what's going on. So I found that to be very impactful, in addition to some training around giving and receiving feedback. I think this is one of the most difficult things for managers to do. It's a skill that needs to be developed and practice across the board. And I think we do a really great job helping our clients' managers with tools and resources, giving them feedback models to use to help structure that, positive and constructive feedback, and really encouraging people to reframe how they think about feedback. We know most people avoid giving feedback at all costs, but they need to keep in mind that we do employees a disservice if we don't, let them know where they've missed the mark, and, give them, that they need to change the language from, negative to constructive, right? See it as an opportunity for growth. And also making sure that feedback is balanced, it doesn't always have to be constructive. We want to give employees positive feedback when it's due. So when a manager does need to have a tough conversation, it's going to be coming from a solid, place, that a solid, relationship that you've built that's based on trust and respect. Um, and I don't want to keep on just droning on, but I want to also touch on performance management training, because we do a lot of performance management training and kind of process development. And, the ask is oftentimes for, like a manager training on performance management, or can you just send me like a review template that we can use? And we really see this as an opportunity for us to act as a strategic partner and kind of like read between the lines a bit and help develop a performance management strategy that's going to improve the experience for employees and managers. And I think Sharon and Meg would agree that oftentimes, we really need to start from the beginning, right? Like, so, okay, you wanna do performance reviews, but like, let's talk about what you're doing right now. Tell me about like current state, right? Like, walk me through your current performance management process. What's working well? Where are there issues? Let's look at your current template and then ask that $1 million question. Is regular feedback happening today? What's the basis of your performance reviews? Because we really want to lay the groundwork for success. No one should be walking into that performance review meeting completely, surprised by what's being discussed in their performance review. So if there is no regular, feedback happening throughout the year, that's just a huge red flag that we kind of need to walk it back a little bit, right? And once we figure out, any modifications to the review tool, changes to like the cadence of reviews, making a game plan for regular feedback, then we do performance management training. And this is another one that I really recommend. If you do have managers that are doing performance reviews, you want to make sure they're set up for success, because there's a lot of opportunity to kind of get things wrong or to kind of come into the review with, unfortunately, some biases. And we talk about some of those biases in training. Like the halo or horn effect. Like halo effect, the employee can do no wrong. I'm only focusing on like the positives. Or the horn effect, where like the employee can only do wrong, right? Like I'm kind of ignoring where they did do well throughout the year. Um, and also, recency bias, right? I'm only focusing on just like a tiny slice of the performance year, right? If you have an annual review, you really need to make sure managers are looking back and considering that full year of performance, right? So just by making a managers aware of these potential issues, they're less likely to kind of fall victim to them, right? Because they're more mindful when they're coming into that review. And it's also important to make sure that those managers feel kind of prepared for how to have those meetings, right? And you want to you want to ensure there's consistency across your organization. You don't want to have, one manager or one department that's giving everybody, fives, and another department where everyone's getting threes, right? So talking about your process and training to make sure that there are kind of checks and balances in place, right? And then, I've also helped several clients recently to kind of move away from a paper-based review and build out their performance reviews in iSolved. This has been a huge time saver, because we've set up automated emails that will go out to managers, saying, hey, it's time to, work on the review for X employee, as well as building out like a self review. So that'll also kind of go out to the employee. It's time to fill out your self review, right? So it really just, I think, takes away some of that administrative burden from that, internal point person at my client, that is having to follow up with everyone, the employee to get their self review done, the manager to get their review done, right? It's pretty burdensome. So I really love when we're able to help people and kind of utilize the software to make it better. And then too, just making sure that performance metrics are aligned with organizational goals, and making sure employees understand how their work as an individual performer impacts the business, helping clients talk through that as part of training. So that's my long spiel.
Thanks, Jen. I mean, it just goes to show how, number one, how robust training can be in an organization, how many different areas of training are, really necessary and appropriate to prepare your workforce and to prepare your managers. And then, to be able to measure the performance of how everyone is doing based on the results of that training. So it's really important, I think, for people to see this from a holistic perspective and understand, what our approach would be, if we were going to work with a new organization, on their training goals and initiatives. So that's great. One last thing let's touch on really quickly is harassment training, because that is relevant to
Mm.
everybody nationwide. So let's touch on that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things is you just really have to be mindful. This kind of goes back to what Sharon was talking about, when you're getting into new states, right? One of the biggest things when clients are getting into new states, as I advise them on, is making sure they're aware of state specific harassment trainings, because it really is state specific, based on, employee count in certain states. It could be based on the county where you're in. There has to be, there's specific content requirements based on the state where you have employees. Certain interactive components are required and length requirements. And even though it might not be required, it is still a best practice to do harassment training with all of your employees, and it could possibly help your case should a harassment claim be filed with EOC. For example, in Massachusetts, employers aren't required to do training, which is really kind of unbelievable. I can't believe we're not
Always a
required to do
surprise.
it. It's it's
Mhm.
it's
Of
it's,
all
it's got to
states.
happen at some point, right?
I
But
know.
they are required if you have 6 or more employees in Mass, you are required to have them sign off on an annual harassment policy, but trainings are required, but it's still a best practice, right? And it's not going to hurt because we all know people don't necessarily read policies and read the handbooks, even though we ask them to. But training can help reinforce and let employees know we want you to come forward. If something is going on, please come talk to us. And this is how you can kind of let us know if something's going on. And it also is putting, again, on managers, hey, you can't put the earmuffs on. You've certain responsibilities as a manager for making sure harassment isn't happening. And then wanted to mention a special focus on Chicago, Illinois, because it's a really unique states, kind of like a specific requirement for the Chicago, Illinois harassment training. So if you have one employee in Chicago and you've employees in another state, any employee that interacts with that employee in Chicago has to receive the Chicago specific harassment training. It's
Very
really
interesting.
interesting. So you
Mhm.
could again, you could have one person working from home, not in the office with anybody else, but if they, their manager is in Iowa, their manager, is another state, and you have other groups of employees in other states that are regularly talking with that person, they need to get that specific training as well. So it's so important to be working with someone like our team that's going to make sure that you are aware of that and kind of help you with a game plan for getting those folks trained. And we really recommend in those cases where multi-state harassment requirements, it can be so helpful to have a training platform for those trainings. And I know many of us have helped clients with some of our learning platforms getting set up so you can have you know assignments based on state, even based on positions. Sometimes we've helped clients develop training tracks, right? With what trainings are going to be helpful to managers or employees, or yeah, again, those kind of requirements. But that can be really helpful to manage if you do have employees in Illinois, California, New York City, Washington, among others.
It'll be really interesting to see how these different types of regulations actually impact hiring practices, because at some point companies are going to say, I can't handle 50 different states requirements. I'm only
Mhm.
going to hire in one state or
Mm,
5 states or
Mhm.
whatever it may
Mhm.
be.
Oh yeah.
And that will really significantly impact just the way people manage their recruiting and retention, which I think is a great segue into our final topic that Meg's going to talk about, which is workforce
Yes.
management. Because these are challenges that companies of all sizes and industries face in their workforce. You've got to be responsible as an HR person for the entire life cycle, of an employee. So you're starting with recruitment, engagement, retention, everything in between with regard to benefits and compliance and reporting and training and all the stuff that we've been talking about. And it's another one of those things that for companies that have constrained HR resources or may not even have internal teams, they just can't manage it all. So, Meg, talk to us about how you've worked with some of our clients on these like overbearing issues of managing their whole workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. If this, if this webinar shows us anything, it's just how giant the HR function is. And there are so many different buckets that you have to be thinking about if you are, if you're listening today and you're one of these, and you're a solo show in your organization and you have to manage all of these different topics, it can be absolutely overwhelming. And we feel so fortunate to be that strategic sounding board for our clients to really help them navigate all these different pieces. And a humongous one is absolutely workforce planning. I could probably go on a whole hour about this, so I'm going to try and keep this quick. But I'll talk about a few of the different things that I'm working on recently with clients. One of them certainly is the strategies around effective workforce planning in terms of recruitment and hiring plans. And you guys all mentioned in the poll that's the number one thing, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. Recruitment has been a whirlwind. COVID really shook everything up. We have, candidates coming in shooting for the moon on salaries, and we have other industries that are laying off tons of people. It's been the most interesting last 4 and 5 years in recruitment. So one thing that we've done with a lot of our clients, we did a big push on this last year, and we keep talking about it with clients is really looking at your people strategy in a really holistic way. So just like what Jen was saying, when we're looking at performance management, we're also doing that with recruitment. And that's not just the idea of recruitment. It's the entire life cycle that happens there. So it starts from reviewing, how do we even open positions at our company? How does somebody even decide that they need a new position? Do we have the bandwidth for a rec right now? Can we hire somebody else? And what is that process? So it starts even right from there to then developing that position. We need a job description. What does that salary look like? We have ways, our HRPs were armed with a system that allows us to give you guys compensation benchmarking information. So we're helping build out these positions so that they're starting from success. And especially with pay transparency, it all comes back together. Some states are going to require that you're posting that range for that new position when we get to the posting piece. So there's so many puzzle pieces to think about. We're also looking at, how are you building your postings versus your job descriptions? Those are actually two different things. And what do they look like? How do we make your postings really enticing? It's a tough market out there, and I'm sure you're all feeling it. So how are we making our postings really enticing while also expressing the expectations and the essential functions of the job? So it's that piece. Then it's the interviewing, building questions, offer letters. Those are legal documents. We really want to make sure that those things are top notch. It's protecting yourself, it's protecting your employees. We want to make sure that they're ready to go, as well as then you get through that offer process. Now you're talking about onboarding and orientation. And as we've learned, those first 3 months of an employee's life cycle are one of the most important pieces. Even for somebody that has, been with you 15 years, that first 3 months really helped determine how engaged they were going to be with your organization. And so that's another piece where we can really deep dive into that. How are you getting onboarding set up? How do you have the right processes in place so all those boxes are checked? What is orientation looking like for those employees so they feel really supported and set up for success instead of failure? So those are the things that we're looking at. I'm working with a client right now, actually, who's going to be scaling their business in a really wild way this year. They're going from like 3 or 4 employees to probably 60 to 80. So it's going to be a really big task. And we are so excited about it. We're doing that people strategy exercise with them now. We're already a couple months in with it. We've been building job descriptions and, working through their recruitment process and how are we going to scale this recruitment process, which used to be it's a much more intimate process. And we were only hiring maybe one person a year to now really having a very fast turnover for on the hiring side. So it's been a really interesting exercise to be going through that with this client, and it's going to keep stretching. So then the next piece of that workforce planning is scaling your operations post this gigantic growth. And what does that even look like? And all of this then kind of combines the things that Jen and Sharon were talking about as well, is that we have to think about all the different things that come now that we're hitting these milestones of an employee size. So, as our smaller clients, and I said in the beginning too, with ACA are starting to hit that 50-person mark, we have to start looking at different benefit things like ACA. As I mentioned, I had 3 of my clients actually hit that 50-person mark within ACA. So that was a different shift for them. There's all these other different HR areas to consider. FMLA, new reporting things that come up. 100 people have to think about EEO reporting, which Sharon was talking about. And then there's even some wage reporting in different states. California has one, Massachusetts has one now. Even hitting 15 people or 25 people is going to have some different requirements within different states. So knowing all of those different thresholds is enormous. So that's where we can really be a strategic sounding board for our clients as well. As we're in constant communication with you and knowing your growth goals, we're able to be able to bring forward these different requirements as you're starting to grow. And just like this client that I was talking about doing this people strategy, they are now going to be an FMLA covered employer very, very soon, very, very soon, which is going to be a really big change. And there's a lot of different policies and procedures that need to go into place and things to think about when that happens. And as well as the new mass pay transparency law, which I hope you all join me to hear more about in March. But starting in October, this client is also going to need to think about that now when they start doing their postings here in Massachusetts. And, we've talked about this a lot, but certainly growing into new states comes with, it's just so many rules and policies and laws to consider. And you may have the way you set up sick time right now here in Massachusetts, but you get that one employee in a different state like California, and you have to do something completely different or go above and beyond. Like, which state has the most generous policy if we want to have just one policy? But these are all things that have to be thought of as you're setting up in new states, and especially with this workforce planning, or you're having trouble finding a IT director, someone to help out. That's a very common position that I've seen a lot of clients hire outside, somebody who's full-time remote, maybe they just remote into computers. But you have to be thinking about that state that you're going to be hiring that person in, and what does that mean? Just like with Jen's point about that training, you hire them in Chicago, everybody needs to be going through Chicago harassment training. So growing into those new states can be a big lift, but we are absolutely here to support you with that, and really want to have those conversations right when you're starting to think about it. Some other things with workforce planning to think about. This is my favorite thing, is employment law and employee issues. Give me two people that hate each other. That's my favorite thing to do in HR. I absolutely love it. My clients who are on the call know how much I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. I love trying to work through those issues and navigating that with my clients. HR is a very gray thing. There's a lot of gray area when we're working through this stuff, but employment law is pretty black and white. But the HR piece and how we manage those risks, how we mitigate risk, how do we build our progressive discipline so that we can properly terminate somebody and protect ourselves, as well as treat the employee with dignity as they're leaving, so it's not a surprise. There is some gray area there. And that gray is, how are we going to balance that risk when we're dealing with these situations? And so I think, a big philosophy of ours is around education, like Jen was talking about as well. It's a really big piece of what we do with our clients. So I really like to think about that when it comes to risk and employee relations issues. So I really like my clients to know their options. What are your risks if you're deciding to do this or this? We really want to terminate somebody today. Okay, let's talk it through. How much documentation has there been? What conversations have happened? I'm going to be poking holes in this, very blanket statement of, we just want to terminate somebody today, and try and step back, just like we do with performance management. We want to step back and we want to take a peek at all what's under the curtain there about what's going on. And I'm going to have options. It's going to be, hey, okay, I hear your story. This person, they've got to go, but here's option A. This is going to be your most conservative, protect the company the best. It might take some more work. There might be a little bit more of an administrative lift. You have to go back. You may need to do a performance improvement plan. There might be other things. We also have option B and C, and there's going to be a little bit more risk there, and that's going to be a determination that the business has to make. But I hope that with my clients, I'm able to educate them based on my knowledge of employment law, where their risks are going to lie, so that they can feel comfortable making the decision that's best for their business, especially when it comes to employee relations, which can be really tricky. It's it's tough. And the employment law piece too. It is black and white, but it is changing by the day. We are certainly
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
that now. And all of us on the HR services team are keeping up with those things as best we can. We're not going to be touching on the executive orders today during the call. I know we should hopefully be having some content soon coming out, some kind of quick hit things on the executive orders that are coming through. And things are changing day to day. So we are keeping up with them and really doing our best to help support our clients through this ever-changing employment law landscape. I have one client who's very concerned about ICE showing up at their business, and we are kind of working through it together because it's new for all of us here together. And so we are working through supporting them and having best ways to navigate that should it happen. And we're all learning together. And that's, we've built such a strategic partnership with our clients that we do have that ability to really learn together alongside of our clients. So I know, Jen, me and you have talked a lot recently too about some of like, investigations and being a strategic sounding board for clients and how these issues can be all consuming. And hopefully you don't have to deal with them very often, but that's also why you can kind of forget how to deal with it. And that's where we can really, really be helpful for our clients. So I know, Jen, we've been talking a lot about it. So I don't know if you have something to add to.
Yeah. Well, I think just to kind of like build on that too, Meg, right? Like the employee relation stuff, that's a huge part of it. And that's, and we're getting to know you, we're developing this relationships with you. We kind of have a bird's eye view and kind of see like trends in, what's going on, right? And so I think what's really great is we can kind of use that as an opportunity to move from the more kind of reactive HR to proactive HR, right? Because the goal is to try to get, all right, there's been a lot of, investigations of issues. Like, what can we kind of get to maybe a root cause, or is there something we could do kind of more proactively so that we can kind of course correct going forward, right? Or like maybe there's something we can, resolve this a little bit. So now we can start working on things like before there are issues, right? So, project, trainings, right? Like trainings that might help your managers be better prepared to, deal with something before it blows up, or projects that may be better equip you next time before an employee goes out on, PFML, but you didn't give them a job description so that you get, or fitness for duty form because you didn't have a job description, right? So now we're talking about, let's get your job descriptions, up to date. Let's get salary ranges right in advance of the pay transparency law when your employees are going to be able to ask you, hey, what's the pay range for my job? It's not something you have to provide now, but it's something you will have to provide. So you will have to be able to tell them what the pay range is. Doing a pay equity analysis to be aware of any, pay compression that might have happened during the pandemic when, all of a sudden you couldn't find people. So you had to start offering higher pay to new people coming in, but maybe not realizing how it's negatively impacted, some people that were already on your had been with you for a while, right? And not realizing there could be some inequity issues, and we just want to be aware of those optics, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so, before you're budgeting for pay increases, right? So you know how to make those adjustments. So, just being able to like read between the lines, kind of help address those root causes, and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one other, I see Carlos's message here in the chat, proactive HR. What is that like? I totally get that. I saw, another comment you had that you are a solo HR professional, and I absolutely empathize with that. And I think, proactive is so nice. And sometimes there's other areas where we have to really work on our feet, and crisis management can be another one of those areas as well. And even, as things happen to our employees day to day, it could be, natural disasters is a big one that came up this last year. I have a client who's nationwide. They have a lot of employees in Florida who they deal with hurricanes every year. And then they also had employees in Tennessee this past year. And that was really new for their employees in Tennessee. And it's managing, they really want their wonderful client. They absolutely wanted to support their employees. The Tennessee one happened first. And so they really wanted to support them and do all these great benefits and all of these things for them. But they also had to balance knowing that their employees in Florida are going to deal with that every single year. And how do we remain consistent as a business in helping with that crisis management for those employees, while also knowing that we are going to be supporting, creating precedent and supporting employees through crisis management, no matter what it is that they're going through that might be related. And so it can be a really, really tough balance. And that's where I loved being a sounding board for that client to figure out, okay, well, how can we support these employees in Tennessee who hopefully this is like a once in a lifetime thing that happened, while also knowing we have our employees in Florida who deal with this hurricane stuff every single year, and making sure we're being consistent on that. And so it was a really interesting puzzle to put together. And I think they came up with a really wonderful solution. But it was, those are the crisis management things. COVID is another example, which is a giant example, but where we're moving on our feet. We can't be proactive about that, right? We didn't know that this was coming. We're trying to be proactive, but it was like week to week that we're working through these things. And that's where, to Jen's point, we're building these relationships with our clients. We know you, we know your business. We, at this point, know a bunch of your employees just from the stories you've told us. And we are able to really help, even in these not proactive times, these things that just pop up. Somebody gets an injury and we have to help them. There's a death in somebody's family and now they're completely disengaged. How do we manage this with this employee? They're a wonderful employee. We want to support them. They're completely disengaged. What do we do about this? So It's, those personal life events, these natural disasters, even just the changing employment law climate that we're seeing today. Things can happen in an instant. And we're here to really help with that background knowledge and keeping up to date on all of these things that are going on to really help support everybody.
Thank you so much, Meg. That's a perfect wrap up. We're right at the top of the hour. We covered so much. I don't know about the rest of you on this call, but I'm a little overwhelmed, frankly. Sharon and Jen and Meg, you all manage so much for our clients, and we appreciate it so much how important it is to stay on top of all these regulations, all these executive orders, the things that are changing from state to state. It just, it's amazing what you're able to do to stay on top of everything and really help our clients. So with that, I just want to say thank you to all three of you for being such an informative panel. We also want to thank everybody who joined us today for your attention and engagement. We really appreciated everything in the chat. We're sorry we didn't get to your questions, but we'll be able to follow up with people individually. So we will get your questions answered. We also just want to make sure that everybody knows that, MP is available as your trusted resource. Like I said, no matter what capacity you're working with us in today, or if you're not working with us today, maybe you'll work with us in the future, we're available to be a trusted resource for you. We have a continuous series of educational webinars, and we have a number of them coming up in the next couple of weeks. If you're in Michigan, we have a webinar tomorrow specifically on the new sick leave law that we've gotten a lot of questions about from our clients. So really excited to try and help everybody else out there. We also have a demo. If you're interested in seeing a demo of our product, we're going to be doing a live demo on February 26th, and you're welcome to register for that. We talked about our pay transparency webinar. That's going to be on March 12th. And, we look forward to diving in deeper to that. And then we've also got a couple of other exciting topics, one with regard to empowering parents on paternal leave. We're going to get more into training. Please share with us the topics that you'd like to hear more of us on from, because obviously there's a lot to cover. So we're past 2:00. I'll say thank you and give everybody back your time, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Take care.